Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski, alongside his Lithuanian counterpart, Gabrielius Landsbergis, is currently visiting Kyiv amidst ongoing Russian attacks. Sikorski's visit comes at a critical time as Ukraine's pleas for air defense and the right to target Russian military installations intensify. With growing diplomatic pressure and discussions on long-range missile strikes, Sikorski asserts that Ukraine's endurance is not infinite. Joining us today on TVP World to discuss this crucial diplomatic moment is Marcin Zaborowski, Director of Policy at GLOBSEC's Future for Security Program. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you for having me.
So the Foreign Minister mentioned that Ukraine's endurance is not infinite. How does this statement reflect current tensions in Ukraine's war strategy?
Well, clearly, Ukraine is now at war for 2.5 years. I mean, the third anniversary is actually coming up in February, and no nation can cope with constant daily attacks being unaffected. And of course, the Ukrainians are at the end of what they can put up with. Just like imagine if you are a Ukrainian family who stayed in Ukraine and you are thinking about, like, should I redo my house? Can I go on holidays? What about my career? Where my kids were, to what kind of school I should be, choosing for my kids. So people have these kind of decisions on suspense, and that is clearly affecting morale, ability to continue resistance. And this is a large nation. Ukraine at its peak had about 45 million people. Now it's less because a lot of people repatriated, including to this country. But still, if you compare it with the resources that Russia has, the largest country in the world, population of 120 million, large economy, almost infinite resources of gas, oil, and very, very large military. So putting up a resistance against the nation like that is obviously very, very difficult, and Ukraine, as an ally of the West, must be helped in any way possible that we can imagine.
Right, like I said, it's really hard to imagine functioning, living a normal life with artillery constantly pounding your infrastructure for over 1,000 days. I think Sikorski also alluded at allowing the use of Western weapons inside Russia. Well, recently Putin said, on Thursday actually, that NATO would be directly at war with Russia if it allowed Ukraine to strike Russian territory with Western-made long-range missiles, while the Polish Prime Minister has called the threat an indication of the difficult situation the Russians are in at the front. What's your take on this threat, on this issue?
Well, this is obviously the psychological warfare going on here. What the Russians are saying, you shouldn't be doing this, or you shouldn't be doing that, because otherwise there will be an escalation and you will be putting your population under threat. And we've seen it many times before. And every single time when we were providing Ukraine with tanks, with Patriot missiles, with F-16, every single time we heard from the Russians, if you do that, then that will be the end of everything and we will attack you. Well, that didn't happen. Now even we are in a situation that Ukrainians themselves are occupying a part of the Russian territory in the Kursk region, where they had a successful offensive. And nothing really, in terms of Russian reaction, extraordinary happened. I mean, they didn't use a nuclear weapon, they didn't overreact in any kind of a scary way. So this is just a war of words, and I think that Ukrainians have a right to hit the targets from the territory which is used to attack themselves. Yeah? Just like any other nation is allowed to do that.
Right, and like you mentioned, these red lines were drawn, erased, and redrawn against numerous times. And with the saber rattling of the use of nuclear weapon is also, we see it again and again. So you think the Polish Prime Minister is essentially calling him out on the bluff when he made that statement?
I think, of course, he is. He's saying, Ukrainians have the right to defend themselves. And we shouldn't be intimidated by this kind of psychological warfare. Vladimir Putin is maybe using this kind of threats less often, but the former president Medvedev on numerous occasions threatened to use nuclear weapons against Poland. and other nations. And he also threatened the nuclear annihilation of the West. And everybody knows that this is a nonsense. Nobody takes the guy seriously, even though he's a deputy national security advisor. And that they just do these kind of things, and when they, you see it in the headlines, the Russians are happy with its headlines, but it doesn't mean anything.
Right. So now we know that the Foreign Minister Sikorski's visit to Kyiv is a part of a flurry of diplomatic visits to Ukraine in recent days. We saw a lot of movements just in the past few days. Do you think this is a sign of maybe potential peace negotiations with Russia underway, or does this urgency have anything to do with the U.S. election, or maybe Zelensky having to propose a peace plan going into the United States?
I would not put it in the context of the peace negotiation plan. That idea was clearly established there between the German Chancellor and Vladimir Zelensky. So they are essential to making it happening. I'm sure that the Americans were in the loop. The Polish and Lithuanian presence in Ukraine these days is a kind of a routine thing. This is what we do very frequently. It's a show of support, which politicians of various stripes in Poland do, and Poland remains, and as well as Lithuania, remain essential providers of aid to Ukraine from the very early stages on.
Very much so. Well, speaking of this victory plan that Zelensky is supposed to propose to the United States, how do you think that might affect Western support, especially from Poland and the U.S.?
Well, I think at the moment it's a we are in the midst of a diplomatic game. Really, that's what it is. The plan. The former peace conference, which happened in Switzerland, was inconclusive. And one of the reasons why it's being seen as was inconclusive, it was because Russia wasn't invited. And the consequence of that was that Russian-friendly nations like the Indians, the Saudis, Brazilians, they didn't sign up to the declaration. And they had the argument of the sort, you exclude Russia, so we don't want to take sides, that's not okay. Now, it's very important to Zelensky to say that, I invite Russia. Russia can be a part of this conversation. And he is making it difficult for the Russians to say, we don't want to take part, because then they will be immediately questioned by Brazilians, by Indians, by the Chinese and the others, saying, we want peace, we want that thing to end. We are on your side.
Right.
Yeah, we will continue to buy your stuff, but we need to make you some kind of a gesture here.
Right. So the excuse of not being invited is no longer valid.
Exactly.
If Ukraine kind of show goodwill, if you will, but Russia refuses to attend.
Exactly.
Do you think that's what's gonna happen in the second iteration of the peace summit?
Well, I don't think that the summit will actually deliver peace, and I'm not sure that it will even happen. And we are talking about the talks right now. Yeah. And at this point in time, it's important for the Ukrainians to show that they are forthcoming, that they don't exclude anybody, that they have initiative, that they have a peace plan, that they thought it through. They don't need to convince the West. The West is with them. But they need to convince the Indians, the Chinese, the Koreans even are wavering on some issues. So the rest of the world needs to be with Ukraine on that, and we don't have it at this point in time. When we say that the world has isolated Russia, that's not quite true. It's the West which isolated Russia, not the world.
Right, and I think Russia's also trying to present itself as not being isolated, being very frequently engaged in the BRICS nations. Do you think that might lead us to kind of a parallel world where these Russian-friendly countries operate in a vacuum outside of the Western nation, or do you think that the world is in a state that this is no longer a possibility?
We have a bit of a repetition of the Cold War time, when we had on one side we had the West, and on the other side we had the Warsaw Pact nations, the allies of the Soviet Union. And in the middle of that, we have the so-called non-allied nations. And that was a movement which was led by the Indians The former Yugoslavia was also very much implicated in that. And now we see a lot of nations want to be non-allied. Yeah? We don't want to criticize Russia. We are very happy to buy this cheap oil and gas from Russia at discount price. At the same time, we want to do business with the West. Yeah? So there are a lot of nations which are saying that they can use the situation to their advantage, and some of them, Indians in particular, are making a lot of money out of it.
Right, very much so. Thank you so much for your input and insight. I really appreciate it, and thanks for being with us, TVP World.
Thank you.
Cheers. And thank you for watching this edition of World News Tonight. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.